I trust the process. It just doesn't make me feel good when I put together kind of the first time estimate.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's like selling a freaking space shuttle, right? Like I don't know the first thing about a space shuttle, but I'm going to better get ready to sell one because you're not ever going to put one in until you sell one.
Exactly. Hey everybody, welcome to the Make Trades Great Again podcast. Andy and Eric. Andy, how you doing, buddy?
I'm not doing too bad.
Just right on.
Moving in here.
We got holidays coming up. We're recording this just before the Christmas holiday and New Year's.
Yep.
So I'm trying to think. I think this is going to come out maybe the first week of January, maybe the second. I don't know why I even bring that up because I don't know the answer. It's not important.
It's going to come out in the future.
Yeah, we're talking in the past.
That's right.
As it would have to be all the time, I guess. Hey, because it's the end of the year.
Yeah.
Kind of looking back, and I don't want to be like, oh, let's look back on the year and do one of those. We just kind of did that with Tim and John, and it was a cool conversation. I thought I had fun.
Yeah.
But I loved your question, and we were texting yesterday, and you said, hey, like, what do you think about just what did you do in 2024? Like, what kind of job, or what'd you do on the job? Maybe that you started doing more and more, or something that was noteworthy.
Yep. I spent a lot of time in the last year thinking about air to water heat pumps, right? Because it's been a massive thing. It's just like everybody's asking for them.
Yep.
Or everybody's asking, can you do it? Right. And I hadn't done it previous, and you hadn't either until just
Are you
recently.
saying customers are asking, or just everybody's like, just kind of in general, we're unsure of the tech?
That's exactly that. And so customers are reaching out to me. We've serviced their boilers for years, or we've put their boiler in, whatever it is. And they're like, hey, can you do this? Is this like a thing?
Yeah.
And because we can't find anybody that knows anything about it, and I'm like, it's a thing. I haven't done it. And so I would say for me personally, like on a personal level, one of the largest accomplishments that I've done that like has like cleared my head about, well, is that going to work? Is putting in that Viessmann heat pump.
Yeah. You've done two of them now. I've only done the one.
But it's nice.
You helped me with it.
Right. But I think you'd agree. It's really nice to be able to go, yep, I've done that. I know what's involved here. You've kind of bounced through some of the hurdles. You've touched all the pieces.
Well, yeah. Anytime you do something new is a lot of unknowns, right? The details.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. And to be blatantly honest, both of us are still in the trial phase of these things. Is it going to work? What's going to happen when it's 15 below zero? In your case, you got a gas backup. Mine's a sole source.
But it has got that cold. And like, for instance, this one is, they're rating it for 13 below, right?
Yep.
Output.
Yep.
It's performing, the one that you helped me with.
Yeah.
And we're not using the gas right now currently. And so it's interesting. It's, what's funny is that I'm not as focused on the install that we have out there.
Yeah.
I, as you know, because I was just like totally blowing up your texts about it over the last couple of weeks, is I just sent out a proposal, an estimate to a new customer.
Yeah.
For this system. And the impetus was, it kind of started, the question from this customer started a couple of years ago as replacing his neighbor's boiler.
Right.
He has like an older, imported, name brand, I don't even know, hydronic heat pump that's been sitting there forever, and he bought the house and it doesn't work for heating, but it probably needs a defrost board or something like that. Anyway, nobody knows and nobody wants to deal with it, so he just uses it for cooling and it works.
Right.
And he's using an electric boiler for his heat source, which in Minnesota isn't abnormal.
Yeah.
And so I had to, he asked me a couple of years ago when I was doing that boiler, the neighbors like, hey, can you give me a price on a heat pump system? And I'm like, well, actually we're not even doing them yet because they're not really available. This was a couple years ago, like when I think at the time, the only thing we knew of really that at least I knew of was a space pack system.
Yep.
And I don't even know if that was available at that moment in time when he was asking me about this. So that's kind of that's where it started for me. And then fast forward, he saw my YouTube video from you and I doing that install.
Yeah.
He's like, okay, I see you're doing them now.
Yeah.
Can you give me a price?
Let's go. Put me on the list.
Yeah. And so like back to how I started this little, jaunt. I'm less concerned about the system we have installed working because it is working. And it's not without its own little bugs. We're kind of ironing those out with Viessmann, actually, you and I and a few others. But putting the proposal together for this one because like I didn't have to do an estimate for my family. Like that's where we installed it. Like, and if anybody doesn't know, it's Heather's sister's house, that kind of thing. And so like, I just said, hey, can I put this in your house? And they're like, yeah, go ahead. Cause they trust me.
Right.
And as you saw, their heating system was great. Like they were like, yeah, if you want to do that, Eric, you can do whatever you need to do.
Right.
And it was a project for Mechanical Hub, basically.
Yeah. It was nice that there was room, right? There was room to add it. It wasn't like an under the stairs mechanical closet where
we didn't have to make anything fit, not just like space wise, but like it was set up for this. Like it was a perfect drop in. Hey, now you have a heat pump.
Yeah. Yeah.
But putting that proposal, that estimate together was nerve wracking. Like it kind of always is the first time you use a piece of equipment you're not exactly experienced with, or like, the deal. I don't know. Maybe I just am getting in my own way about that, but I trust the process. It just doesn't make me feel good when I put together kind of the first time estimate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like selling a freaking space shuttle, right? Like I don't know the first thing about a space shuttle, but I'm going to better get ready to sell one because you're not ever going to put one in until you sell one.
Exactly. It made me, it's funny you say it that way. That's what I was thinking is like, I just have to get out there and do it.
Yeah.
But in order to do it, you have to sell it. Like, so like, kind of more relatable for me is when I started selling Viessmann boilers.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted so badly to install one of those CU3As, the big floor standing refrigerator looking thing.
Yeah.
Because I read all the information about it. I read the manual. I'm like, man, this thing is freaking amazing. Like, holy cow. And so I sold my first one, but at a really discounted price.
Right.
And it was solely so I could get an installation under my belt.
Yeah.
It worked out. Everything was great. I mean, I covered my costs and made a little bit but honestly, not like
you should have. Yeah.
Not like I should have, because I had a lot to learn from that first install.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I decided to do that personally.
Yeah.
And it worked. And I'm so happy because, since then, I know for a fact that I've installed more than anybody here in the state of Minnesota, for sure.
Right.
Or at least I've bought more than anybody else. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I've got a couple of projects on the books right now that are in design phase, if you will.
Yeah.
On new tech that I am not yet comfortable sending the price on. And
it's hard, isn't it?
And they're controls jobs.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
And
you need to stop that.
But you know what? I sold the last sets of controls. Everything has worked fine for the last 12 years. And now the product's obsolete and I can't get the parts for it anymore. And so both of them technically are about ready to fail.
You're not technically on the hook.
No, I'm not. However, I'm on the hook on the sense that I know that I could go to both of these customers who I've already told, hey, FYI, this stuff is on the way out. At some day, I'm going to come in and tell you that this doesn't work anymore. Right.
Yeah.
So we should be ahead of this so that it's not an issue.
Yep.
And both of them have said, okay, well, just let us know how much.
Right.
And now it's back. That's the immediate, I wish you would have thought about it.
Well, when you have that conversation, speaking of and it's a little off topic, but it's a conversation I just had this week. So it's fresh in last week, it's fresh in my mind. When you have to tell somebody this is obsolete. This isn't supported anymore. I'm not talking about like an old heating system or something like that. That comes up all the time.
Yep.
But I had a customer, or I had a person call me. They're fans of the videos and stuff like that. So, and they saw me working on Kyle's place, and they're like, "Oh, you're in Minnesota, right?" And so we get that whole scenario where the guy's like, "I'm going to give you a call." And then you answered the phone. I was thinking it was going to be somebody else. I'm like, "Dude, it's just me, you know?" Like,
Right.
And he's like, "I got this system." I go and I take a look at it, and it's a slant fin Lynx,
Yeah.
which is not supported.
Odd, crazy odd heat exchanger design.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Weil McLean Ultra.
Yeah, kind of ish.
Yeah, and
Was it the cylinder shaped heat exchanger? Like
no,
round,
it looks a
vertical?
lot like it looks it. If you hadn't seen a Weil McLean Ultra aluminum heat exchanger in 15 years, you would look at this and you'd swear it's that.
It's that.
It looks they're very, very, very similar.
There must be 2 generations of the Lynx.
Okay.
And maybe it was a Bobcat. Anyway, the slant fin had one for a while that was like a aluminum cylinder with fins on the inside. And it had this heat shield in the bottom. And the condensate ran down and around this heat shield. It reminded me of the heat shield that's in like a Wiesmann or something like that, where it's that kind of real dense, hard cake, if you will. And there was one of those in the bottom. And I ended up sucking it out with a vacuum. And apparently once you take it out, you can't put it back.
Oh.
And I mean, the boiler was trashed anyway, but I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, oh yeah, that thing isn't supposed to come out. And I'm like, oh, well, it did.
Well, like this Lynx though, like seeing this for the first time, I'd never actually run into these in the field.
Right.
Which
I've only seen a couple.
Yeah. Honestly, the only other contractor I knew that was installing any kind of ModCon slant fin stuff was you.
Yeah.
You were doing a model a number of years ago for just a brief time. I can't remember what it was, but it was a wall hung, right?
What's that? The slant fin?
Yeah. Didn't you do a few?
Yeah.
I'm talking like 10 years ago.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember what the heck the name of that model was. CHS.
CHS, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, CHS. Yeah. And those are solid boilers.
That's what I was thinking.
I've got 3 of those.
But the point is like I had this customer now with this system that's it's 2013.
Yeah.
So it's not even old.
Right.
But it is old now. Like,
yeah, it's 10 years.
There's an old Honeywell control in it, which is very specific to the boiler. It's not like I can just go get that Honeywell control. It's like model serial match. And, inducer, things like that. That's all. Like the Lynx, that boiler was discontinued by Slant Fin 10 years before they went out of business. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that's what the kind of product you're dealing with. So there's nobody that's got parts for these things.
Right.
They're done. You're cooked.
They're
something
done.
Breaks on it, you're done.
Yeah. Basic things, a gas valve. Maybe you could find a gas valve. Something like that, but it's going to be random. I mean,
what my experience with that? Yeah. So I don't mean to interrupt. Sorry. My experience with, maybe you can find a gas valve thing with equipment like this that's been, mothballed is you're not wrong, except for here's what I've encountered. You find one and it's like in New Jersey and it's one of 2 that exist. Like literally you've somehow succeeded by, exhausting the internet's resources,
right.
Found 2 that exist. And they're like, yeah, we're not selling you, Mr. Contractor in Minnesota. F off. We've got guys that have been installing these things for years and we got to support them. And which is kind of hard to argue against.
Yeah.
Cause if I was, buying from that supplier, I would hope that they didn't sell out parts that I might need, but that's been my experience.
There was one a few years ago. I ordered it was a Munchkin control board or something like that.
Yeah.
That was like not the 926, right? So the older 925 version,
no outdoor reset,
no outdoor, no post purge. It was all the basic like OEM 2003. type thing, 2001 type thing. And I'm like, all right, let's see if we can find this thing, and I find one and I'm like, sweet. Shows up, a week later or whatever, get this. I take it to the customer's house, take it out of the box. And I'm like, dude, this thing's installed. It's got like pipe dope on it and like freaking laundry lint. And I'm just looking at it like, I know that this is the board that came out of somebody else's boiler and it got
put back in the box.
Yep. And then it got taken back to the supply house and then it got shipped across the freaking country.
Oh.
And I call this company. I'm like, hey, what the,
yeah,
this thing's used. And they're like, no, it's not used. And I'm like, it's got freaking laundry lint stuck in between the freaking resistors on the board. Like,
yeah,
it's just been in somebody's basement for 10 years.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, it's not, it's new. It's new. I promise it's new. I'm like, dude, it's got like pipe dope all over it. Like clearly the package has been opened. It's been like taped back together. And he's like, no, it's new and new quality. I'm like, I put it in. Of course it didn't work. It's got a dead fan or some freaking thing.
Yeah.
It's just like, God dang it. So there, your 10 days burned. Poof.
Well, I sent a proposal to that dude last week,
Yeah.
I sent it actually yesterday.
Yeah.
For that, like,
Nice.
He's like, can you just tell me how much it is to put in news? I'm like, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I gladly, I will tell you how much, I'll give you a proposal to replace what you got.
Yeah.
Let's put cause he's got a Bradford White indirect in there. That's, 2013.
And so the indirect is connected to his electric boiler?
No, it's a Lynx. It's a gas boiler.
Oh, the Lynx. I thought you were.
Yeah,
okay.
sorry,
I
not
thought you were
the
talking about the
heat
heat
pump
pump guy. Got it. That makes sense.
So I gave him the proposal yesterday. I sent it. I just saw that he opened it this morning.
Nice.
While we're talking. I just checked on it while we were talking about it. And then I gave him an option of like, hey, we should just like cut this terrible zone pumping piping that you've got and we'll put a low loss header in and at least we'll improve what you have. And then when it's time to replace the boiler and indirect, which is probably soon.
Yeah.
The indirect at least. Then you can spend more money if, at that time. But, see systems, the other thing too, this is so off topic of what we started talking about. Do you often see, so like what's really popular in Minnesota through the early 2000s was like radiant was being put in these custom homes where it was basement, garage floor, right?
Yeah.
And then like, oh, we'll put it in your primary bathroom. And we called it a master back then, but we don't now, so like then there's a couple bathroom floors. This house is that it's got two bathrooms. One's the primary, one's the kids, out in the hallway bathroom, upstairs, 2-story, and they're back to back with each other. So there's a manifold buried in the wall on the middle of this master bathroom wall. Makes no sense where it's at. It's got this access panel on it. Like I'm not dogging the homeowner is property, nothing like that. I'm saying who put this in this way? Like this is just a terrible execution, right?
Yeah.
And then so there's 2 3/4 lines run to a 4-loop manifold upstairs.
Yep.
And then that's the zone. Like they're controlled off of one thermostat in one of the bathrooms, not both. And because there's not zoning on the manifold as far as controls.
Yep.
And like you run that those bathrooms call for heat, right?
Yep.
And they're set pretty high. I walked up there and it's like 76 degrees set point. I'm like, holy crap.
Yeah.
You're like, you get a freaking sauna in here, a steam shower. And I'm thinking about that boiler just cycling on, off. Cause you can't put enough heat through 3/8 PEX into a thin slab floor. Cause that's what it is. It's, mud pack over top of tubing.
So they're trying to run like high mass rate or, slab temperature water through this thing and get it to work.
Well, you got to up the temp so much to make it happen. And then now you've got a zone pump. You got 3 zone pumps downstairs. And by the way, actual zone pumps.
Right.
With the Takeo,
is it the ZVs or ZVs?
Yes. Like what the hell? This is the worst. I hate them. I hate them. There's not a dog on Takeo. I hate that pump. I hate it.
Yeah.
And anyway, So now you got this zone calling, firing a boiler for like, at most you could put in there, 1,000 BTUs?
Yeah.
Like how much BTUs could a bathroom possibly take?
You know what? Funny fact. Probably 2002 or 3, maybe somewhere in that range. 3rd-year apprentice. It was found out that I knew how to solder electronic circuit boards.
What?
And
I found out like some Oracle was like looking at the ball and like Andy knows how to solder electronic.
Yeah. One of our service techs, the older service techs, was like, I have all these Taco Zone priority pump control boards.
Yeah.
That have a bad solder joint on them. And at the time he couldn't hold his hands still. He had a shake.
Yeah.
And so he goes, I can't solder them anymore. So I've got all these boards. I've been waiting for somebody. I need to just find somebody that'll solder these connections. And so he was rebuilding those. So like for a long time, the originals of those didn't have the plug-in.
Yeah.
Right. They were a screw down terminal.
Okay.
And I don't remember which one it was. It was like the R terminal or something like that. That was like power out for your thermostat.
Yeah.
The R terminal solder joint was as manufactured from Taco, a weak solder joint.
Yeah.
And if somebody got a little over carried away with the number 2 Phillips, 6-in-1, they'd pop that solder joint
for that 18 gauge wire you're connected to it.
Right. You'd put 400 foot-pounds of torque on it.
Yeah.
And
get the impact.
Yeah, exactly.
Ugga-duggas.
Ugga-dugga, yeah. And yeah, so he had this box of these control boards. He's like, there's nothing wrong with them. They just don't work, And,
yeah, well, there's nothing wrong with them because they're broke.
Except they're broke. And so I don't know, I spent maybe an afternoon. It's funny you said that zone priority thing, and it brought that memory back. But
I can't stand those circulators. I hate them.
Solder in that terminal, flip the board over upside down, look, flashlight. Oh, there's the crack. Heat this thing up, solder it back in. All right, that one's good. Okay, next.
Oh my gosh.
And
I wouldn't have the
box.
patience to pull the board out of the thing.
Oh yeah. But here's the deal. That was at a time, right? 20 years ago was a time when you fix things, right? All of the guys that were old in that world, they fix things. You didn't replace a boiler because there was obsolete parts. There were no such thing as obsolete parts, right?
No,
it's a cast iron boiler with a gas valve and an aquastat.
Yeah, we were just in the early days of condensing equipment, but for the water side of things.
But you fixed everything.
We were replacing cast iron boilers, put it that way.
I mean,
I don't like the product though. Like, right. I don't think it's a good idea.
I get that. Yeah. Yeah. I was going through, and this has come up on the podcast a couple of times. I bought this like tote, this big, huge crate of crap. That's what I'm going to call it.
Yeah.
I was going to call it something else, but whatever. It's a family friendly show here, bud. I bought this bucket of stuff.
Yeah.
And in the bucket of stuff, I'm looking through it, and 8 months ago, Tristan was out here at the shop. He had didn't have anything going on for the afternoon. And I was working in the office or working in the shop. We're like sorting through this stuff. Like, what's garbage? Most of it's garbage.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're going through, and he's like holding up these parts, and he's like, hey, what's this? And I'm like, oh, that's a, whatever, a CAD cell for a, fire. It's like a fire eye for a big commercial burner. And he's like, oh, that's cool. Whatever. So going through these things
you'll never use it.
No. And then we come across this box, like a cardboard box with like the kind that's like soaked in oil.
Yeah.
It's like, how old is this? I mean, this thing's been around since like 50s or 60s. Like this is, 70-year-old cardboard. Flip this thing open. I look in there, and here's a whole pile of Robert Shaw gas valve repair kits.
Oh my God. Nobody's repairing gas valves.
From back in the day when you didn't replace a gas valve, if the diaphragm leaked, you just took the thing apart and put a new diaphragm in it. Right.
Yeah.
You could change your spring range. You want a gas valve that operates between 5 and 11 inches instead of 3 and 6. Well, there you go. Put the spring
you could
in.
like disable first stage, or you could fast acting, slow. So you could all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's not happening today.
Right. He's like,
I
I just
just-
keep that. And I was like, no. Dumpster.
Well, I just replaced like a 48-year-old gas valve.
Right.
I ain't rebuilding it. I'm sure you
No.
could get a kit for it. It's an old
yeah, you might
Honeywell
be
like
able to.
800 series or whatever, and I was like, no, standing pilot,
Yeah.
like no, I ain't gonna.
Yeah.
It got a Robert Shaw in its replacement because it was half the price of a Honeywell Residio, like
Well-
literally half the price. That is insane.
Yeah. I guess I'd be curious. Is there anybody out there, any of our listeners, shoot us a message on this. Is there anybody out there that still has an orifice bushing kit?
Oh,
So
yeah,
that
Mike
you can
Ring
make
has
your
them.
own orifices. There's a handful. I bet there's some guys out there that have done that. There's not many, no new techs are doing that.
No.
But
If you live like on the edge of rural and you're doing like
Yeah.
conversions from natural to propane, that kind of thing, or
Yep.
back and forth, going from propane, and
Yeah.
you might just have orifices and like understanding the in a
Right.
drill bit set, like
Yeah.
you might be doing that.
do you
kind of
carry
work.
a drill bit set on your van?
Do I?
Yeah.
I have a couple. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't ever use them.
Yeah.
They
have
come
one.
out when we got to do like a fireplace.
Yeah. I use them for cleaning orifices is about the only thing I do.
Yeah, that's probably the last
get one that's
reason I
super
use one,
dirty.
to be honest with you. And now I also have to find it. I'm like, where did I keep that stupid freaking thing? It's one of those. Honestly, it's a little plastic case, and and I'm like,
Yeah. Little flip bit.
there's a couple
up and you're
loosey
like,
goosey orifices in there.
yeah. How often do you open it and all the bits are not where they're supposed to be?
Every time.
Every time.
I don't even know what size they are.
Yeah.
I'm like, now I'm just feeling. I'm like, I think this is right.
Yeah. I have a metal case that's got a little metal clasp that actually stays shut. It's nice. You open it up and it's like a little binder, double-sided thing. And it's nice, but it inevitably, unless I've got it like wedged, standing upright, the slots are long enough
And the bits are short enough.
And the bits are short enough that if you tip it upside down the other direction or it falls over and rattles like 3/4 of a
Worthless.
mile, the
Yeah.
whole thing's out of order.
Yeah, worthless at that point. And then I'm not getting the micrometer to measure my drill bits.
No, you
Okay.
sit there.
So we're gonna go back to original subject because we're gonna stop in a few minutes.
Yep.
We don't want to be too long.
No.
I was looking back and like kind of you were talking about like just this year things
Yeah.
changed. We really started going forward with these heat pump things. My kind of looking back was I realized last night as we were talking, initially brought this up. I replaced 3 boilers this year
Yeah.
that I installed original.
Old fart.
That's just it. That's the significance is old fart. Yeah. Like 2001,
Yeah.
2000, 2003, like right around there.
Yeah.
As I was starting to sniff around about getting my own, starting my own business and stuff, these were installed by me when I worked for somebody else.
Right.
My last job, right?
Yeah.
More or less, close to it at least. And so I installed these when they were new construction houses.
Yeah.
And I was one of like 2 guys at the shop. I was the young guy trained by the other of the 2 that did boiler systems, right? So
Right.
And it was interesting. One of them, they were all 3 different brands of boiler.
Okay.
Which was interesting. They probably weren't all done like the same year, but to have them replaced, like to see a full life cycle on a piece of equipment is interesting because we're now old enough to do that.
Right.
And I'm talking a life cycle, meaning like not something that only lasts a couple of years, but like
Yeah.
major equipment piece of the boiler itself, not talking about a water heater that might only last 10 years. Like that doesn't seem to be significant to me.
Right.
It's bigger than that. So I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting.
And you're right. It's because I'm old.
It's
It's because I've been doing this long enough now
yeah.
that I can actually walk into mechanical rooms years and years later, obviously, and be like, wow, this looks familiar. Like, oh my gosh, I installed this.
Yeah. What's interesting is when you look at some of those and you go, oh, I installed that for someone else.
Yeah.
Yet here I am.
Yeah. Yeah. Here I am, not them,
Right.
not on behalf of them.
Yeah.
Um, and inevitably, this is the case. I've done this regardless of whether I'm replacing something I installed originally or I'm just seeing it for the first time many years later.
Yeah.
I look at it and I go, yikes, who installed it? Right? Come on.
Yeah.
Is Andy going to admit to that, everybody? Is Andy going to admit, like, if he walks into a mechanical room right now from a job he did 20 years ago, is he going to be like, ick? Or is he going to be like, wow? So I want to know. What's your thought?
There's a few that I walk in and I'm like, ooh,
Yep.
I didn't know.
Okay, thank you for being honest.
I didn't know what I thought I knew.
Yeah, I know. Well, we weren't working with the same, set of knives, right? Like we just didn't have. You're always going to build on your skill, and you're going to do something different today than you did probably 2 or 3 years ago.
Well, and I think the reality of that is too is that we've spent, you and I both have spent at least the last 15 years, right, refining a process that we already basically knew how to do.
Yeah,
we haven't changed like what we're doing. We're just changing how we do it to a more efficient or more effective way, and it's all about realistically, if you think about it, that slant fin Lynx boiler, right?
Yeah, super basic.
Didn't have a cycle counter, didn't have an hour counter, whatever.
Yeah.
So you started installing Lochinvar, right?
Yeah.
Very first boilers on the market to really easily display how many cycles, how many hours,
how long it's ran, that kind of thing.
And so I remember early conversations with you and I, pre-Viessmann, way pre-Viessmann, right?
Cycle counts.
Looking at it and go, oh yeah, I got this boiler with, 58,000 cycles and, 29,000 hours, and you're like, oh, that's freaking cool. You do the math and that's like two hours a cycle, and then we fast forward to today and I open the app on my Viessmann account and look at
your free app, by the way,
65 boilers or whatever that I go, oh, that one's at, 12 minutes and 38 seconds runtime.
Yeah.
Huh. On heat.
Or this one's at 2 hours, 54 minutes.
Right.
And you're like, whoa, we sized that one like exactly so freaking perfect. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's exciting to see that too. Yeah. Like even just that detail.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so, things have changed a lot. We've gotten richer. No, the reality is we've learned the importance of the components that we thought were too expensive. We weren't going to install because we didn't understand their importance.
Yep.
That's what it comes down to, really. If you think about it, it's understanding, like you said, like you were exactly dead on. We've learned so much,
right? But
part of that learning had to be like, I'm going to trust what these people are saying. I should install this component that costs $500 when I didn't, the low loss header.
Yeah.
And now I look at it and be like, can you imagine doing a job without one?
Yeah. I'm like, oh, God,
what am I
putting this in a double?
What is this, a ghetto? I shouldn't have said that, probably.
I know. It's not very nice.
No, it's just like you understand the importance of things, and it then becomes like you're not going to compromise on it.
Yeah.
And so you look at those old jobs and you go, wow, like I thought I did a good job when I did that.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
there's no doubt. And then I come in and I'm like, this is so much nicer that it could be done poorly and would be a huge improvement.
Yep.
There you go. So there's my 2024 looking back. I replaced 3 boilers that I installed originally, and at the end of their very productive life cycle. Put it that way. That's just called being old.
It's
well,
all
dude,
about being old.
We're at the end.
Right there. Just crept right up on us.
It did.
It's time to go to work.
All right, dude. I'm going to remind everybody who's still listening, and thank you, by the way, and watching on YouTube. We do appreciate those views. It's awesome to see the comments and stuff like that coming in. Send us an email, and it's at it's Gmail address. It's maketradesgreatagain@gmail.
Perfect.
Give us topic ideas, feedback, whatever you want. Don't try to sell us anything. And if you want to be a guest on our podcast, but you're just a recruiter, then we already know. We see right through you, Karen. We see right through you. We know what you're trying to do. We don't need your book author guest proposal. Like, you never listen to you don't know what we're all about. And hit us up on the DMs on Instagram at Mick_Plum is Andy, and I'm at Mechanical Hub. And then finally, if you're listening on a podcast app and you're streaming us, there's a link right there, right in the show. Like, click on the episode, and there's a little link there, and you can send us a text message.
Yep.
That's it. Andy says, "Yep."
Easy.
No, I you got to throw all this in there, right? You have to. It's just part of doing. It's the housekeeping, as they say.
Exactly.
And it's important to us that you we hear from you. You know, we love to. It's important. Like, we don't overlook any kind of feedback you give us or any kind of messages or anything like that.
Yep.
Our last episode that went out today, that as we're recording, was a question for you, Andy. You remember about you know, how do you handle working in the field and running jobs? You know, like, so we're looking for those messages, and we love that you're listening and watching, and we look forward to hearing from you. So, all right, that's enough. See you later.
Later.